insight on my ongoing PhD project on Latvian peasant representation in photography in the 19th century. I'm a participant of the program Baltic Borderlands at the University of Greifswald, that's in Germany. It's like right here. So this project focuses on, this paper focuses on a part of my PhD project, in particular on discussion how the 19th century Latvian intelligentsia spurred on the scientific and anthropological importance of photography. Began to use the indexical power of images as a tool for engaging with the world and for producing ethno-schematization. In particular, I want to examine how the Latvian intelligentsia conceptualize the identification of Latvian ethnicity with peasantry and use the new technology of photography to draw their social and cultural positions amongst the society which inhabited the Baltic region of the Russian Empire in the late 19th century. I refer to territories consisting of the Baltic provinces, Kurland and Livonia, and a part of Vitebsk Governorate, located in the Russian Empire's western periphery. So, like these territories cover the area of contemporary Latvia. At the same time, Russia's western borderlands constituted the geographical and spatial configuration at the margins of Europe, setting a geopolitical background over the course of sequent centuries. Social and political inequality determined relations among Latvians and non-Latvians, I mean Baltic Germans and Russians. This project will make a unique contribution to research on the borderland as a space for cultural and intellectual exchange, as well as an incubator in which the environment encourages the formation and development of new hybrid forms of visual anthropology. At my today's talk, I will focus more on the trajectory, how Latvian elite built up visual appearance of Latvian peasants, which was shaped by multicultural context and brought a very different set of influences to the practice of photography. Despite the abolition of serfdom in 1870 in Kurland and in 1819 in Livonia, in the middle of 19th century, the upper social group still was made almost entirely of German speakers. The lowest social group, the peasantry, was made up almost entirely of Latvians. Their agricultural occupation was dictated for centuries to subordination to the strength of nobility's political and economic power. The second part of the 19th century was challenging for Latvians in various ways. One of the most apparent changes being social differentiation among Latvians themselves. One of the indicators was a dramatic shift between rural and urban areas experienced by Latvian population in the middle of 19th century. Latvian rural population were migrating to urban spaces and slowly developing as a middle class. According to historian Andrejs Plakans, these urban changes encouraged the formation of Latvian intelligentsia. They also formed the core of the first Latvian national awakening from the 1850s to the 1880s. I would like to stress this aspect is of importance. Being rooted and coming from the rural area to the city, they found the focus to the traditional culture being very related, at the same time complemented their origins. Maneuvering among both German and Russian cultures, this new formation was intended to create a new cultural setting based on the concept of the Latvian nationality. At the same time, despite the ethnic dissociation, Latvians were compelled to adapt the German and Russian culture through their language, which became crucial in standing up for Latvian national interests. The knowledge of languages allowed the Latvian intelligentsia to become familiar with the Western and Russian intellectual culture, and that was also the only way of receiving an education in universities. To give an insight, as his main idea, Garlieb Helvig Merkel postulated that the dominant German culture was by no means superior to the Latvian population. In 1860s, the widespread path of language-based identity, taken by Johann Gottfried Herder's ideas, also echoed in the souls of Latvian intelligentsia. Collecting and publishing folk songs became an essential activity during the period of Latvian national awakening. Moreover, Herder makes his central arguments on identifying the character of nation, which develops in relation to the local climate and in intimate connection to the land. National awakeners also drew up in German geographical ideas to imagine a primordial connection to nature as a central element of national consciousness, come to be known as Heimat. Artis Kronwalds, one of the early leaders of Latvian national movement, coined his concept on Heimatkunde, or like in translation in English would be homeland studies. And his first book, Der Unterricht in der Heimatkunde, published in 1867, here is publication in Latvian in 1922 on the screen. His Artis Kronwald's main ideas were knowledge of the homeland's natural terrain was a crucial source of love of the fatherland. Nature was a reservoir of national character and living witness to the nation's past. The Latvian nationalist interest in peasant culture also corresponded with widespread aspiration by academics in the Russian Empire in exploring the people in the Russian narod, or at the same time, peasants. Apparently at that time, ethnography as a newly formed science captured the interest of the Russian people in exploring its complex population and understanding its past. In particular, I mean the Imperial Society of Friends of Natural Science, Anthropology and Ethnography, which was founded at Moscow University in 1863. At that time, there were several intellectuals of the Latvian national movement working closely with the Russian institutions. One of them was Fritzis Brīvzemnieks. So he was Latvian folklorist, poet and writer who was involved at the Imperial Society of Friends of the Natural Science, Anthropology and Ethnography. He was a mediator between the Imperial Society and the Riga Latvian Society, which was founded in 1868 and which was a core organization of Latvian national movement. His duty was to coordinate the collection of Latvian ethnographical material for Rumyantsev Museum in Moscow. In 1860s, the department was missing material on Latvian ethnography, and representatives of the Imperial Society delegated Brīvzemnieks to collect the Latvian ethnographical acquisitions. By the Imperial Society, Brīvzemnieks was commissioned to hold an expedition to the Baltic provinces, where he went for 4 months. In 1869, he mostly collected folklore, but as well ethnographic objects. Besides his collection work on Latvian folklore, he was promoting the interest in anthropological knowledge through publications at the Riga Latvian Society loyal papers, Bals and Baltijas Vēstnesis. His articles offered a wide range of topics, starting from a review of the first Russian ethnographic exhibition in 1867 in Moscow, also announcements to submit Latvian ethnographic material and folk songs, or detailed instructions of the principal techniques of physical anthropology, with the persistent call to Latvian people to collect measurements and submit them to the Imperial Society in Moscow. Definitely, Brizovnik's articles are part of national discourse, where scientific knowledge is employed to produce an ethno-schematization of Latvian rural population. Among articles fall with pathetic fallacy of primordialism ideas dominating at the time in Latvian periodicals. Brizovnik slowly established his credentials as an anthropology science popularizer for the Latvian audience, which was an informed reading public, and he was building their understanding about it through the case study of themselves. How photography medium was positioned in the Latvian national discourse. Indeed, photography was an unusual occurrence in the late 19th century in the countryside of the Baltic provinces. At the same time, photography played an important role within a new Latvian city culture. Starting from 1860s, members of the Latvian national movement had been using photographic studio portraits to promote their leaders, mostly building internal supporters community. Like Krišjāns Valdemārs, a Latvian writer, editor, folklorist, politician, economist, and the spiritual leader of the Latvian national movement. Reading his correspondence with permanent frequency, Valdemārs' comrades asked for his photo portraits to share among the growing group of followers. Until now, I haven't found any more initiative and interest by the Latvian national movement how to apply photography. A Russian academic's interest in Latvian ethnography was motivating for the Latvian intelligentsia to apply a scientific approach of photography medium, taking so-called Latvian types. And here I would like to show the collection which I'm working, which is primary source by Jānis Krēsniņš. The presented portraits are selected from the collection of 277 prints, revealing the first attempts of ethnographic photography in the Baltic provinces at the end of the 19th century. In 1895, the photographer's author Jānis Krēsniņš was one of several participants taking part in expeditions to collect objects for an exhibition of Latvian ethnography organized by the Latvian Society. Being a professional decorative painter, he was a dedicated member of the society, had a broad range of interests, being a collector of folklore and ethnographic objects. It's important to admit he is coming from farmer's family, the northeast Latvia. Obviously, going for expeditions, he used his background and knew how to communicate with encounters in rural areas. The exhibition where the collection was presented took place during the 10th Congress of Archaeology of the Russian Empire in Riga, from August 1st to September 15th. 1896. The Congress in 1896 was a compromise and balance among three different cultural interests: Latvian, Baltic German and Russian. The Riga Latvian Society accepted the proposal and delegated curators to work out the program of the ethnographic exhibition. According to Jānis Stradiņš, a well-known Latvian scientist and science historian, none of the members of the organization committee of this exhibition organization committee, they were not professionals, they were patriots of Latvian culture. From Brīvzemnieks, the organization committee of the exhibition in Riga had received documents and instructions how to hold an ethnographic expedition. Besides Jānis Krēsliņš, 6 more photographers were commissioned to take photographs of Latvian types for the third section of the exhibition called Anthropology and Statistics. The case study tests how photography approached scientific ideas which were used to legitimize Latvian ethnical existence among dominating power groups. And I discuss the borderland as a space for cultural and intellectual exchange. In particular, I use Marie-Louise Pratt's concept of the contact zone in order to illustrate intercultural relations as a space where different concepts, approaches, and assumptions meet and interact. Hybridization produces new cultural representations, but also demonstrates multiplicity of possible interactions between science and popular imagination in the local context in Latvia. Hybridized Latvian peasant representations become a sign of impure mixing, propagated by the dissolution of political, ethnic, cultural, and intellectual boundaries. These photographs reveal hybridization not just with their semi-quality, lacking photographer's craft and not fully following instructions for angles. Here we see the boy is photographed from above, and it should be more like combining external anthropological knowledge with Latvian traditional culture. The portrait collection is a try to adapt more progressive ways for presentation. Using this approach and techniques, anthropometric photography, members of the Riga Latvian Society describe themselves in ways that engage with representations others have made of them. The choice to represent Latvian rural dwellers was determined by the external impulse of an increasing desire to schematize human classification, as well by Latvian national self-identification in the context of socio-political history at the end of the 19th century.
Спасибо. Есть ли вопросы? Пожалуйста.
Hi, yeah, thanks for that talk. I would have some questions. The first question would be, they are not in order, I must say. The first question would be, from other countries I know that local photographers, no matter of what nationality they were, would go out and take types. Like I know it from Austria, I know it from Germany, I know it from France. The photographers would just, to sell them to tourists, would go out and try to photograph local types. I was wondering whether there was a similar practice in Latvia, which includes the question whether there was any kind of, say, tourism or whatever, which would feed or which would use this kind of photography, or which would buy this kind of photography. Same thing, by the way, is that local photographers That means the photographers operating the photo studios would take photographs of monuments that were whatever dear to that could be sold as well, landmarks. And I was wondering whether there was, to rephrase the question, if photography was used by the Latvian intelligentsia to sort of promote a self-consciousness of Latvian nationality, I'm wondering, the first thing I'm wondering is why did they choose the rural population and not, for instance, the city population? Though I think, why did they sort of made Latvia a peasant country and not so much displayed themselves as being the intelligentsia of Latvia, which would, I think, be as important for them to get the Latvian self-consciousness. Yeah, I think I stop here. Sorry. We have some more.
Thank you for your question. I will start with the second one. And so why they focus their on this rural people? It's like it's still ongoing project. So, but what I've observed, like there are a lot of controversial things, like in Latvian society actions. So basically, there's happening this urbanization, like which starts like very much like in the middle of 19th century, and who moves to urban space, they try fast way to adapt values and to be integrated in this new environment, and they are really trying to find ways, and so like they see education as one way how to fit in as well, and but at the same time, like when it's goes further, they like when it's established Latvian society, they fast may realize that they are new in the city environment, in the urban environment, and they are weak. And mostly, population who could be supportive them is in countryside. And still they have, as they recently moved to the urban space, they have relatives and or like there are this link with this rural area. But it is like very interesting how really Latvian societies they understood the power, like and also like there is really nicely like nice quotes that the power actually is in peasants. They realize themselves, and they establish this network with these newspapers, booklets, and they inform them what's happening in urban, like in Riga, like in the center, and so that's why I think it's also they have this connection links with this rural population, but as well as I try to say that they catch this idea that like of this scientific like scientific ideas from main scientific centers like Moscow, that they can as well exploit peasants in the name of science, and just like taking these patterns, scientific patterns, and making expedition and an exhibition, like kind of this sequent points which like they kind of observed what's happening around, like and that's why. So, and about the first question, why why Latvian photographers taken
whether local photo studios would go out into the countryside or get peasants into their studios and photograph them in their local garment, their traditional garment. Because those images were sold at other places to tourists and local collectors and whatever.
There were some very like some cases, but it's not widespread. And actually, like reading protocols of Free Latvian Society and how how they try to apply this scientific ideas and try to involve rural people. And they say that like peasants are very reluctant to share their traditions because like they don't see this point, and it's just like it takes a time, and then like what's happening in 20th century, like when in interwar period there were really big ethnographical movement too, and so it kind of takes time to population understand as well the value of these actions.